Hello, and welcome to Thinking Around the Question, the show where we take a question, pull it apart, and never really get to an answer. You're joined by myself, Dr. Musa Sami. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and Dr. Jonathan Newman, who's a social anthropologist from Gothenburg. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm good. I am from Gothenburg today and loving it. Fantastic city, a brilliant public transportation. I mean, just unbelievably brilliant. And yeah, you see what a massive difference it makes to the world. So I'm just overcome by the beauty and the architecture and the efficiency of Gothenburg. The bike lanes are absolutely everywhere, water taxis, well, water buses, buses and trams everywhere, all over the place. You don't really need a car, and it's much better for it. It's a fantastic place. Fantastic. There you go.
Is it? Well,
And I avoided the
what are you
UK
doing?
election.
We'll speak about the election in a minute, but what are you doing in Gothenburg?
I'm on a tour. I'm going to try and circumnavigate Europe by going around the outside, around the eastern edge, while it's still there, before it sort of gets into a war zone. So I'm sort of going to head off now, and I'm going to in a couple of days I'll head off up through Norway, and I'll try and keep going around Norway. I'll end up having to catch buses, and right at the very top of Norway, it meets Russia. And there's this sort of wavy road line, which is Russia and Norway, and there's a beach. And it's quite funny if you look on Google Maps. Part of the Norwegian beach
Mm.
has now got a bit of Russia in it because either the line's wrong or the sand moved, which I think the sand's moved probably. So it's and then yeah, then I'm going to head down through Finland and into the Baltics, and I'll do it bit by bit. But I kind of want to see it because I suspect it's going to change quite a lot. There you go.
Yeah,
That's
I
what I'm
think
doing.
so. I mean, one of the things that's very interesting about the Scandinavian countries is, they are consistently rated as the happiest places to live in the world, isn't it? They're also the most socially equitable and just, and they seem to have the best, you know, state systems available as well. They have the best data from a psychiatry point of view. They have beautiful registry data. All of our big studies come from there. All the big observational studies, and yeah, I mean, do you feel a difference when you're there? I mean, there's a lot of gloom and doom in the UK at present. Is that kind of all lifted when you go off to Sweden?
It's hard to tell because you're a visitor, so you don't really know what life
Mm,
is. You just have these little.
yeah.
So I think it's all about ferries and these beautiful islands. I think it's all about the beauty of the place. But I don't live here, in that case, it changes. So I don't know. I mean, the person in the shoe shop today was talking to me about the English elections, and they were
Yeah.
pointing out their shoes, which were extremely nice shoes, great walking shoes, guaranteed for life, and they repair them. A fantastic shoe. And they said, but we only sell them where they take euros, so we can't sell to you guys. And but they can sell to me in the shop, but they can't export to the UK. Brilliant shoes. I mean, guaranteed for life. A walking shoe, guaranteed to life, and doesn't fall apart. And your modern trainer falls apart because it's made of composites, which degrade. Even if you don't use it, it degrades. So the sole falls off and it cannot be replaced.
Mm.
Anyway, I'm getting into the shoes. I also spoke to someone who did, what did he do? He did freeze dried food for 25 years. He's been in the freeze dried food business. I'm going to interview him formally. We had a drink.
Mm.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Freeze dried food. You wouldn't believe how fascinating it is. It's huge, huge industry with all these little differences and quality control methods, and fascinating. There you go. I also spoke to someone who does. Here's something you need to think about. He does laser hair removal for men when it starts coming out of your ears and your nose and your everywhere. He says you've got to do it before you go grey, because once you go grey, it can't see it because it's
Oh,
white
okay,
beneath the skin.
okay.
So you've got to move fast. I'm doing a bit of publicity for him. Anyway, so that's been my travels through Europe. You want to talk about more serious matters, I imagine, don't
Well,
you?
I mean, it's a nice juxtaposition, isn't it? I mean, talking about Europe and Englishmen in Europe, because essentially, yesterday, today, um, this weekend, the results are coming out of the local council elections. They've been long awaited. They have, I think, somewhat been overblown and been called Britain's midterm elections. I think that's a bit rich, that for us to call council elections midterm elections, but they have been seen as a judgment of sorts on the current government and Keir Starmer's Labour Party. And essentially, the story is that Labour have been essentially routed. At present, the Reform are the biggest party, which is just unprecedented. I mean, it's a party that hardly existed 3 years ago. They have 1,400. They have 1,400 councillors. They're still going to win several more, um, and I mean, it's exceptional kind of rise to power. But I think, Jonathan, that what I am concerned about, because I have to tell you, put my cards on the table, I'm concerned with the reform government. I'm less concerned about what they do with the councils. But in 3 years' time, 3 years' time, when there are general elections, what will Britain look like under a reform government? And do I have a place here? And that's a kind of serious question I wanna put to you.
Well, I have no idea. Hello.
Yeah.
Let's be reasonable. I don't know whether you, but I hear what you're saying. Do I have a place here? I mean, don't forget. Let's look at it in practical terms. Those reform councils are going to have to run local governments hard enough at the best of times. Even harder if you just come into the whole system and it's all new to you, and you're going to be full of ideology, which is going to really mess up the pragmatism of running a council. So all those councils, almost guaranteed, will be a mess, and people will think twice. But of course, they won't think twice because there's something going on with the whole reform thing. I mean, okay, it's
Mm.
taking votes away from Labour, it's taking votes away from the Tories, but there's something else. I mean, here we go. This is what I find fascinating. So I'm staying at an Airbnb in Denmark, in the middle of nowhere. I mean, in the middle of nowhere, really. And the Airbnb host, who is Danish, starts telling me about broken Britain, very angrily, very angry about broken Britain.
Oh, really?
That, that Keir Starmer is the most stupid man in the world, that he is working for the Rothschilds
Mm.
family. He's a puppet for them, and that he's the leading globalist. Um, and I was thinking, and there was an A.N. Rand book on the shelf, and I was thinking, oh, was it Broken Britain? What else was going on? The farmers had stopped growing food. There was no food being grown in Britain anymore. They were just growing solar panels, which were absolutely
Hang
useless.
about, Johnson.
And
Let me just
this
stop
is
you
very
there. I'm
important
just
when
gonna.
it comes to reform. I'm just going to give you two more things.
Yeah.
And then what was the other thing? It's all corrupt. And there were potholes this big, which there are potholes that big. The funny thing is, a lot of what she's saying is what goes on in the reform chat. It's about reform. I've discovered through other bit of political research. Well, putting out messages about we'll be growing crops, not solar panels. Broken Britain. This phrase, broken Britain. Starmer. He is useless. Starmer. And I'm thinking, I'm in Denmark. What's it doing there? A friend of mine came back from Thailand. He said, no, the same messaging's over there too. In other words, something Reform are doing is that they're either riding a wave which is going global,
Mm.
or someone's putting out a wave that is now global because of the nature of putting out waves, and Reform are part of it. It's quite interesting.
But Jonathan, okay, yeah, I'm going to talk more about why that's going global. But firstly, I want to just get your setting right. So if you go all over Europe, you go to any German city, or any Swedish, Danish city, you will find a shop, a British shop, right? And then in that shop for Anglophiles, right? And these typical shops, probably less so in Paris actually, but in these typical shops you'll find little mini Union Jacks. You'll find little tin London buses.
Shortcake,
You will find,
shortbread, yeah.
shortcake. You'll find, yeah, all the paraphernalia of what Britain is supposed to look like. Little Paddington bears as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it one of those shops? Was it one of those shops you have in this? It's kind of aimed at expatriates. A taste of home kind of
No,
thing. Was it
no,
one of
no,
those
no.
shops?
No, this person's Danish. No, no, no. They
Yeah.
don't. They don't. And of course, everything's corrupt. Everything's corrupt. But it's the fact that they're actually on message. They don't know they're on message, but they are on message for this other party. I find that quite fascinating. How someone from another country can unwittingly be on message for a party miles and miles away. I find that very
But
strange. Like,
Jonathan,
of all the
I
things they could think, they happen to think these same phrases. How very odd.
what have the Rothschilds family got to do with it?
God
Where's this come
knows.
from?
God knows. Probably the internet. But the point is, why would someone be pretty much on message for things that Reform are
No,
saying?
no,
A
but
Reform
yeah,
on message for I just don't know. I just don't know.
I'm gonna give you
Things
an
are
answer to that.
afoot.
Yeah, things are. I'm going to give you an answer to that in a moment. But this thing is something we hear quite frequently. I don't actually know the story of the background of the Rothschilds family. I'm sure that they were a very big business family, and they had their fingers in a lot of pies once upon a time. In my life, I've never come across them. But why do they keep? I of course I presume that they're a Jewish family, and there is an element of conspiratorialism, perhaps this element or symbolism of this kind of global elite who control everything there, right? Um, I presume that it's not really tethered to reality, any of this kind of conversation. But why do they keep coming back into conversations like this? It's really interesting, isn't it? It's got that whiff of mysteriousness of you don't really quite know what's going on behind the scenes, but I do. I have this access to
Ah,
this kind of hidden
nah,
sacred knowledge.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's no winning, and it's very simplistic thinking. And it says they sort of said to me, "There's only one thing you need." There was a lot of this. There's only one thing you need to know. There's only one thing you need to know, and these people, whoever they were, have control of you, and unless you agree, it's very evangelical, but it's rather than evangelical happy people
Okay.
talking about God, they're very angry,
The-
and this is where reform becomes interesting. Reform, they're very angry. There's an angry agenda. It's a revolutionary agenda. It's anger. What's what's that? What do we do with this anger? You're a psychiatrist. What is that?
sure. I mean, okay. I think, John, yeah. There's several different things we need to unpick in all of this, isn't it? But one of the things that I want to get to is where is all of this coming from? And what I think I've understood as a British citizen, not just as a psychiatrist, just as a British citizen over the last year or two, is that the digital space in Britain and the digital conversation is extremely important, and it is transmitted all over the world. This morning, actually, I had messages on my phone about their council results in England being sent from my cousins in Pakistan. They were sending me, they're keeping up with this more than I am. And one of the things that I think that we are not thinking about is this valuable space that we have, the valuable kind of conversation that we have amongst ourselves as a nation, what it means to different countries, and how many malign actors are trying to intrude on this space. And if we think about it, we really know, we know that Russia is trying to, for example, run disinformation campaigns in our country. We know that Iran may be trying to do the same. We know that actors from the UAE are doing the same. We know that actors from Israel are doing the same. We know that far right evangelical actors from the States are doing the same, and they're all projecting onto Britain. And they're telling us that Britain is some kind of disordered, dysfunctional nation, and none of these people have Britain's interest at heart, or none of these actors. They're not interested in the community cohesion of our country. They're interested in projecting their own narrative about what's going on. And this is a big problem. And I don't think that we as a people, or as a nation, as a country, are pushing back against this. And I've named you 4 or 5 different actors, states, organizations from states, but it's not just them, it's many, many others.
So I'm gonna flip this in a sec. So look, let's just presume you're right. But of course, the nature of the democratization of information through the digital age is you can't actually see who's placing what where. It's very hard to trace. You just have these clumps of information, and of course the algorithms draw you to where you're gravitating, or you get pulled into the stream of it and it takes you further in. This is the nature of it. Whether you're shopping for jumpers or you're angry from Doncaster or something, it doesn't matter. You're just still being pulled by the similar streams of digital force. But let's say that's why Britain. They're not doing it, as far as I know, to most other countries. Britain is the target right now, and it's very important to see that. Why is Britain the target? I think the reason Britain's the target is because the levers worked well enough. We've got through Brexit. We were levering it further. If you cause Britain to go, it has major repercussions on Europe, and that has major repercussions on major geopolitics between Russia, America, and the rest, and the Middle East. So Britain has to go, and it's going. I mean, this is what's fascinating. It is going, and it's very rude of us to have this conversation, because in a sense we are just joining. We've discussed this before. We're joining the conspiracy, but we've got our own conspiracy, which is reform have no real base. It's just disinformation affecting people, and these people must be a bit stupid somehow to believe all this rubbish, which is of course absurd. This is absurd.
Jonathan, I don't know. Jonathan, I live in a paradigm where, as a British Pakistani man, by and large, for the last 43 years, I have had rights and they have been respected. Nigel Farage becomes the Prime Minister tomorrow. I'm not sure that they will be respected in the same way under a reform government that they have been respected my whole life. I have to say this. I'm extremely worried about it. I'm worried for myself. I'm worried for my family. Now I'm being told that no, you don't have to worry, doctor. Why are you worried? Is it, that this is not against you. This is against those illegal immigrants who come over the boat and rape people. But I can't help but think actually there's something kind of sinister in this whole conversation. I'm not endorsing for a minute that people who seek refuge in this country are all rapists and illegals who rape people, right? I'm not endorsing that. What I'm saying is I think the narrative is pointed against me. I feel it personally. Am I wrong to feel that, Johnson?
So let's put it in terms of a political research question. What would they need to say to make you feel reassured? What would reform have to say to make
what they
you
would
feel?
need to say. It's what they would have to do. They would have to tell me that, for example, my faith as a Muslim is important in this country. It's as important as any other faith in this country, including Christianity, including Judaism, including people with no faith. They would have to say that British Pakistanis, British Somalis, British Sudanese are just as valued in this country as native English people, or the British, or the Irish, or the Jewish community in this country. They would have to. They wouldn't just have to say that. They would have to demonstrate that. And it's
How
not
would they?
difficult
How
to
would they?
demonstrate,
How would
Jonathan.
they
It's
demonstrate?
very.
How would they demonstrate it?
You can demonstrate it by, um, well, firstly, I think that the kind of narrative, for example, the narrative that I've heard over the last 5 years, which has made me very angry, which is why we do this podcast about Pakistani rape gangs, about, for example, cousin marriage, about all this stuff about culture wars, all of these kind of things. Somebody needs to put a stop to it and say that, hang about, we all have a, a piece of this country and a part to play in building that community cohesion. That's separate from saying that we need a sensible and controlled immigration policy, which I don't think anybody disagrees with. But I think that the fear mongering, I think the the building of narratives, and the perpetuating of stereotypes, which I find often from these politicians, especially of the far right, or the harder right of the Conservative Party and Reform. I worry about it, Jonathan. I can't say that I don't. And one thing
So,
I don't understand, Jonathan. Yeah,
what's the one thing you don't understand?
this is bizarre. I'm a doctor in a clinic. I see my patients. I like them. They like me. I get on I get on really well with them. We have some banter. They end up saying, "Doctor, you've done so much for me." They open up to me. I'm very privileged to be in the position that I am. And of course, majority of my patients are, of course, from the majority background of this country, which is mostly white. Then I go and look at the polls, and I find that people are Reform is polling at 35%. I find that Rupert Lowe's wacky party is polling at 5%. And I'm like, where are these people in my clinic? I don't generally see them. I
So,
don't understand this, Jonathan. I don't understand this.
so let's pull it down because you're
Yeah.
misrepresenting reform, which is
Yeah.
see, reform is a party of immigrants in many ways. So reform has
Mm.
got a whole load of immigrants from the Conservative Party and immigrants from the Labour Party.
Sure.
So it's got these, and it has had mass immigration in it in the last year to 2 years, which has fundamentally changed the political landscape. But it rather likes its immigration because it's boosted its numbers. But it means it's got a wide spectrum of people, far more than it can probably handle. And in that spectrum, we actually have a multi-ethnic grouping. So we can see, and of course it pronounces them quite well, but we can see it's got quite a spread in there, and it may not consider itself multicultural, but it's certainly multi-ethnic, and therefore it's got wide appeal. It's an alternative to the two parties who feel they've been let down. It's got strong appeal to working class and lower middle class. Strong appeal there. And it's now sort of taking over some of the sort of richer parts of the Tory party because the Tory party's not got any balls left, really. It's gone. So, I mean, its rise doesn't necessarily mean it is as right wing as it otherwise would have been. Somewhere along the line, it can't be that right wing. Now, unfortunately, it is far more right wing than we've ever been used to. And the thing with fascism is historically it grows off the support of working class and lower middle class people. That's what makes it fascism. It's not fascism because it's an elite movement run by a small group of people. It's fascism because it gets this large amount of support from these class sectors. So what's going to happen? And you've got Farage, who sympathises with Russia. He sympathises with Trump. He's probably in allegiance with both. They're probably in allegiance with each other. There's
Well,
something going on. Who knows what it is? Meanwhile, everyone's
I
seeing a
mean,
conspiracy elsewhere.
I mean, what's bizarre is, it's come out in the last couple of weeks or so that Farage got a £5 million personal gift from essentially a Thai cryptocurrency trader, Chris Harwood, who I think is British by background, but essentially lives in Thailand, has taken a Thai name, um, and also it's also well known that he's traipsing over around UAE, taking money and raising donations and all of these kind of things, right? And none of these things seem to be affecting reform in the least. With the I mean,
No,
these things are just, Jonathan. These things are just scandalous.
that's
Um,
right.
but people are just continuing to, and it's almost as if it's the Pied Piper who plays his flute, and all of the kind of British minions, the voters, yeah, they just line up and just go, and ultimately, if they're not careful, they'll all end up in the river, because that is the way that's essentially what happened with um, the the Brexit referendum. That's what is we are in danger of in happening to us if we just draw up the borders and close off immigration and cause all undertake the reform agenda.
So let's look at that in three different ways. So one,
Sure.
you have this
Okay.
thing with immigration. You've got immigration does many things, but two of the things it does. One is it fundamentally changes the visual, the audio, and the sense of where you are. Because and you see it strongly in Europe. You walk through Hamburg, has got strong Turkish areas around the station. Strong. It's like you're not quite in Germany anymore. The buildings are the same, but it's not. It's real Turkish culture on the streets. You walk, various places. You end up in these enclaves of different way of life. That's also what cities have always been about. There's, the Scottish would have come to a city and have the Scottish
Mm.
quarter, the Jewish quarters, the French quarter, the Latin quarter, all of this. This is the history of cities. But it has this, and of course, we're undergoing mass migrations at the moment, so we're seeing this amplified. And that is change, and that's rapid change, and people are not quite sure where they are with that. At the same time, migration brings us incredible things. It brings us spaghetti. It brings us noodles, which and noodles lead to spaghetti, and we get the spaghetti. It brings us cheeses. It brings us architectures we never thought about. It brings us entrepreneurship like you've never seen. I mean, one of the reasons why the migrants are
I
so
mean, just
noticeable
coming
is
in,
because they're so entrepreneurial. Carry
just
on.
coming in there, Jonathan. It's interesting you talk about Germany and Hamburg and the Turkish experience. Of course, one of the key scientists involved in discovering the COVID vaccine technology, I think the mRNA vaccine, and his wife are essentially German Turkish sort of immigrants. I think they're second generation, right? So it also brings us scientific progress. It brings us technological progress. It brings us new ways of thinking within the UK. I can tell you that immigrants basically run the National Health Service, and if not the National Health Service, they definitely run the psychiatric or mental health services, right? If immigrants left, there would be you
Yeah,
would be
we
in
can,
dire
we can
straits.
yes. So look, here's the thought experiment. Remove all of immigration.
Mm.
Just remove it. Just see what the world would look like without it. Remove it. Well, we can't even live off blooming potatoes. They're my migratory object themselves. I mean, it's a very odd world. So obviously, there's something about it that we do need. So we've got this thing around migration without really thinking through the pros and cons of it. We're just looking at it very crudely, very simplistic. We're back to that woman jabbing her finger saying, there's one thing you need to know. You only need to know one thing. Only know one thing, one thing. And I keep thinking, but that doesn't help, does it? We actually got to know lots of things all at once. We've got to know lots of possibilities. But that's, you know, but that's not how politics works. It does tend to work on a one theme, get the people moving, get them on your side. And right now, that's what it is. And you know, we've come out of a pandemic which caused a major economic shift. There's been so many economic shifts. We've now got this war, the Gulf War, the Ukraine War, massive economic shifts. It's, governments are all in crisis. And who's actually causing all this? I mean, it's fascinating because when you speak to conspiracy people, you think, God, you're absolutely nuts. You're just believing anything. But then you have to sit back and go, well, what do I believe? What do we do when the truth is very confusing? What do we do when the truth isn't clear? What do we do about that? It's very difficult. I think what we don't do is suddenly get behind a political party and think there lies salvation, especially one like Reform, which is it's, it's a I mean, what's nice about it? I do tell you what I like about Reform. It's got the dad's arminess to it. It has got it's dad's army to an extent, but we don't want them running the country. I mean, they're fun. They're a good laugh on the TV at night, but
Well,
we don't want
this
that.
is a, this is exactly what I'm worried about. You know, I mean, reform was a kind of interesting phenomena. It was a representation of anger, of the failure of the mainstream political parties or mainstream politicians to engage. Um, it was a protest party of sorts, right? Protest parties have always existed. They've been part of the British body politic for as long as I can remember. But now reform is not just a protest party anymore. Now reform is on course to win the next election. It may not do so. And, I think there's enough chance that reform or the minute, that Farage or Farage's ministers will badly shoot themselves in the foot by misreading at some point the mood of the British public over something, because I don't think that the British public and reform's actual ideas are completely aligned. I think it's
It's not about ideas, Musa. Look, the
yeah.
man was paid 5 million quid, which he didn't mention to anyone. I've been paid 5 million quid to stand for a member of parliament. By the one person paid me 5 million quid. Didn't care to mention it. It came out, didn't deny it. Instead, suddenly put out a big story about they're going to. But look, the point is, it can't fail because it's there's either an awful lot of resources creating the infrastructures for that message to go out, or people are in that point of revolution where they reject old tropes and they accept new ones as if that makes any difference. Uh, it's very
you know
disturbing. It won't end peacefully. It won't come down.
when
There
I
is no
was
down.
Jonathan, when I was a kid in school, they taught us all about the Weimar Republic, and they told us about post-war Germany, and they told us about the circumstances in which in which Nazism essentially flourished. And you wonder if at that time I didn't understand any of that. Why are you telling me? I'm a British Pakistani kid in the 1990s. Why are you telling me about what happened in 1930s in Germany? And why are you saying again and again to me that this is a warning, that we must make sure that these circumstances do not happen again, that this does not repeat itself? But it seems to me, somewhat strangely, that we seem to be walking back into those tropes again. I'm not saying that the reform is the Nazi party. I am saying that we are slowly and surely being radicalized. Again, we are going down right wing, populist, reactionary forces, and this is not going to end well for the country. And this is no longer for me just become a matter of idle curiosity, but it is very realistic. that these forces could overtake us and be malign and toxic to the body politic of this country.
So let's look at a couple of things on that. One is, when
Sure.
history happens, the historians get out and they go, well, what were the causes of the First World War? What are the causes of the Second World War? What are the causes of the rise of Nazism? And they look at factors like economic depression, growing this, the use of amplification, whatever it is. They look at all these factors. And then the other thing happens after the Second World War is people were rather shocked by what had gone on during the Second World War. It had sort of taken turns, which is odd because war is usually pretty bad. But here we had sort of mass industrialized human destruction going on and justified. And so the question people had was, why do people obey orders? So we end up with all these little psychological experiments on why people obey orders. So in other words, the thinking of it was, this wouldn't have happened if people hadn't obeyed orders. But what we're seeing now is quite fascinating, because what we're seeing now must also have happened in every kind of revolutionary time, must have happened in this time as well. What people don't talk about, they talked about charisma, but that was only simply because old Weber had been talking about it before. Like there was some sort of magical charisma going on. But what we're talking about is an effect. We're talking effect with an A. We're talking about this emotive charge going on. We're talking about the political mobilization of anger. You see why it's in every revolution. This political mobilization, not of the idea doesn't matter. It doesn't. You could say, "Oh, we're going to make more cups, or we're going to have more pencils, or we're going to have less pencils and more cups." Policy ideas, or everyone's going to be having £5 a week more, or £10 a week plus a free banana or something. None of that matters. It's all about who can generate enough emotive charge in people, and that's what we're being led to. I mean, it's quite fascinating.
What is that? What is that about? I mean, you've talked about anger or emotive charge, or you could add a couple of other emotions to it as well that we know are there, right? You could talk about blame, or you could talk about scapegoating, because essentially in these things, that's what happens. I mean, we don't need to think about every individual time this happens. These are the emotions that get. What are those emotions? Those emotions as powerful projections where we project these things away from us onto some representative object. And therefore, by doing that, we essentially free ourselves from that internal issue, right? So the fact, for example, that, immigration actually benefits us, right? That it's good for us, that we require immigration, that we have constant imports, exports into our country, that's of goods and of people, of services, and all of these kind of things, and that there is a world which is interconnected, and that we need to constantly negotiate our values in dealing with that interconnected world. And that's all very messy and it's all very difficult. By suddenly displacing this onto, well, all of these feelings that we're experiencing that we really don't like, and that we are feeling that our culture, and you aren't even able to define what your culture is in often in these conversations, and by projecting it to say, oh, well, what we are not is those bad people over there. And it's those bad people over there, that other group, that it's their fault that we are, having trouble in our economy or our quality of life or other things. That's a very powerful emotion, and it's very difficult to displace or to argue against.
Yeah, but reform is bigger than that now. It is bigger than that. It's taking on other things too. It's taking on the collapse of two parties. So, it's just the vacuum. So it's the, the Greens have got the same thing. They're sort of being invited to Johnny No Mate's party because no one wants these other things. But to come back to what this projection is, when people have a loss of control, when people have a sense of abandonment, and after 50 years of neoliberalism, if you're not fending for yourself well enough, what's the difference between abandonment and fending for yourself? They are the same thing. Where we have such publicized extremes of wealth, where we can see some people doing very well. And it's not like you come across them once in a while. They're on our screens every day. There's this big money. There's loads of money, loads of money. But most people haven't got it. Most people haven't got control of things. The millennials, Gen Z, they've pretty much been economically cut out of any form of home ownership. They're real, and they're on gig economies. They don't have careers anymore. They're really up against it. So you've got that going on. And then in that loss and control, what are you meant to do? What are you meant to just go along with everything, or are you meant to question it? And if someone turns around and says, I'm going to take back control, I'm going to make you be heard again, I'll hear you. I mean, I might not hear you. I mean, don't forget, Trump has been promising that group, classically his support comes from the people who didn't go to college, the lower middle class, the working class who didn't go to college. That's where, I mean, not all of them, obviously, but that's where the bulk segment is. I mean, he hasn't actually done anything for them, but he's made them feel good that something is going to be done. They feel heard, and being heard and validated is huge. So that's really the emotive trick: get heard, get validated, and get people angry, and then you can win.
But the thing is that somebody needs to turn around and say that the whisperer, the one who's been whispering all these things, he's getting £5 million in his pocket from some foreign crypto billionaire. I mean,
but does it matter? That's the point. But that's the point, Musa. It doesn't matter. Look. Let's say he turns around and it turns out that Nigel Farage is getting paid £2 billion from the Russians. Let's say that. It doesn't matter. That's where we are. It doesn't matter. You could find out that Donald Trump categorically was up to his neck with Jeffrey Epstein raping teenage girls. You could find that out. It doesn't matter. That's where we are.
Jonathan, it doesn't matter in certain planes of existence. It doesn't matter if your ultimate goal is the capture of state power, and all that matters is the vote and which way it turns. It matters in terms of morality, in terms of human dignity, in terms of the overall fate of nations. It matters. It matters who our leaders are. It matters that they have integrity. It matters that democracy works for us, right? It matters. It doesn't matter if the be all and end all is getting the vote and getting the seat, and after that you can do what you want. So I agree with you there, Jonathan.
Yes, but why doesn't it matter to people? You'd think £5 million as a one-off donation, which you don't declare. People go, this is as corrupt as it gets. People don't care. They still voted them in. Doesn't matter. That's where we are. The next act is about to begin. But this is history.
On that rather depressing note, Jonathan, shall we end it today? Because this is an ongoing saga, and we'll see how it continues.
See how it continues. Yeah, I'll see how my journey continues. I might maybe the internet will be better in the north of Norway. All right, Musa, it's been very nice. Thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.